It was around summer of 2014. I had just graduated out of college and my family needed to move to another city, so our under construction home would soon be finished. We ended up getting 2 condo units. I stayed in the 3-bedroom unit with my grandma and then 4-year-old cousin. Let's call her Anna. Anna's parents stayed in the 2-bedroom unit since they worked the night shifts and didn't want to end up disrupting everyone's sleep when they got up to prepare for work. It was right in the middle of the first week that we'd settled in that Anna suddenly got sick. My grandma brushed it off, saying it had been too much time in the cold pool. It was relatively quiet and Anna just slept it off the first night she was sick. The next morning was pretty uneventful. Anna and I were talking over breakfast and she was happily telling me a story when suddenly she stopped mid-sentence. She slouched and her eyes drooped, her mouth slightly open and the cereal just gushing out of her mouth. Knowing her, she would not prank me this way because she's easily icked and will not spill some chewed out cereals on her just for a prank, and damn it, she's 4 years old. I screamed for my grandma after what seemed like an eternity that I just stared at her, not knowing what to do. I realized our grandma wasn't in the unit. She had went up to the upper deck to do her laundry. I rushed out the front door and ran the stairs right up to the deck. Panicking, I told her what happened and she panicked too. We were hurrying out of the laundry area, and when we turned around the corner to go down the stairs, Anna was there, standing as if not a 4-year-old, and her head tilted to the side, and she passed out. My grandma, being a believer of quack doctors over real doctors, called upon one of her friends who's a sensitive and knows how to determine what attacked us, and Anna. Mind you, Anna was asleep from that time around 9 a.m. until 4 p.m. when my grandma called the quack doctor. Let's call her Isabel. Isabel took out a candle and lit it, and let the wax drip on a basin full of water. She then took out the wax that was floating around in the water, and interpreted it that Anna was being attacked by a bad spirit of an old lady who had taken a liking to her. Anna suddenly awakened, hysterical, and kept on shouting, "They're coming! They're coming!" She was crying so much that I got scared and I was already crying as well. Isabel was chanting prayers and everything was moving. Papers, curtains, lights flickering on and off. After a while, Isabel finished her chanting and everything calmed down. Anna had calmed down and Isabel gave her a red pouch with something inside it. She said it's to ward off any bad spirits that may try to come near or harm her. She gave me one too, and just like that her fever was gone. We never told anyone about it, especially Anna's parents, although they had gone to the doctors the day after regarding her fever. Results were normal and nothing was wrong. We never had a normal life after that day. It was a pretty uneventful day. We had just finished settling in our new home and out of the dreadful condo units we occupied while this house was under construction. Everyone else had plans while I agreed to stay behind with my grandma to finish with the decoration details around the house. When grandma's at home, you can expect a clean, fresh smelling house, and she will turn off all unnecessary lights around the house to conserve electricity. It was 11:30 in the morning when she called me down to eat. I was upstairs folding my clothes from our luggage. I went down and she was just taking the food out of the oven and told me, "Oh good, I was just about to call you." It was weird, because I solemnly swear I heard her just call me when I was upstairs. I dismissed it thinking she just forgot. We were eating and talking about plans for the rest of the day. To give you a visual, our dining table was rectangular, with the less wide side facing the narrow staircase that would lead to the bedrooms. That was when we heard it. A few thuds. What we guessed was from the upstairs landing. Then the sound progressed to what sounded like footsteps that was going down the stairs and becoming louder as the steps went further down. Then after the last step on the stairs, it stopped. We both looked at each other with wide eyes, and we were both panting, and it was apparent that my grandma was scared too. She took a huge breath, and with trembling fingers she flipped the switch to open all the downstairs lights and turned on the TV for some background noise. It was 11 in the morning on a newly constructed house. We were so scared that we just ate in silence and just sat in the living room for what seemed like an eternity until every one of our family came home. They asked us about our day, and somehow we both knew in silent agreement that we should keep to ourselves what happened earlier. Later that night around 9, everyone was in bed, and as always I share a room with my grandma, and my aunt who was visiting us was in the same room as well. Everything was quiet and we had a lamp on. My eyes were closed, but I felt a shift in the mattress and the lamp light went out. I assumed it was my grandma that decided to conserve electricity again. I shrugged it off and tried to fall asleep. I heard one of our family members went down the stairs and was going on about the kitchen, and I guess eating, because we can hear the clatter of spoons and forks against the plates and the faucet turning on as well. Mind you, we don't have neighbours yet, so the subdivision was still in early development. I fell fast asleep after that. In the morning, there was a slight commotion when I got to breakfast. Everyone was teasing my aunt, the one that slept next to me, saying that she got hungry again and went downstairs in the night, rummaging for leftovers. My grandma was unaware of this, as she brought my cousin Anna to school earlier in the morning and hadn't been home yet. Everyone saw me walk down the stairs, and when I caught up to their conversation I blankly told them, "No, Aunt Andy was beside me in bed the whole night. I thought it was one of you guys that went down. I was just half asleep when I heard someone eating too." Everyone got silent as I finished my sentence, and from there we all knew that it was never one of us whose noise we heard last night. Ever since that event, we have had our own share of stories that made the chills run down our spines. I've experienced many odd and unexplainable events in my life, but this event has been on my mind for a few years now, and I finally decide to tell it. And pray I'm not the only one who's experienced something like this. So let's start at the beginning. I graduated from high school in 2019 and was promoted to supervisor for a kitchen in a nursing home down the street. Since I oversaw dinner, I didn't start work until about 3:30 p.m. and would get home around 10 p.m. So for the first half of the day, I would be completely home alone. I enjoyed that time. Solitude was always nice, especially when you're as introverted as I am. Normally, I would sleep in until about noon, but this time I decided to relax on the couch in our main living room and watch Kitchen Nightmares. I remember nodding off and falling into a light sleep, so any small noise would wake me up. The first few times I cracked my eyes open, it would just be from the cats jumping on me, so when I felt the cushion by my feet dip a bit, I figured it was my cat, Peach. After a moment I opened my eyes and realized my younger sister was sitting at the edge of the couch, her back to me. I was half asleep, so I didn't really think much of it. I figured she'd just stayed home from school sick. I asked her if she could move her head so I could see the TV, but she ignored me. Still facing the TV screen, annoyed, I asked her why she was home. Once again, she remained silent, coming to the conclusion she was just being rude. Again, I closed my eyes and fell back asleep. After about another hour, I got up and started to get ready for work and noticed my sister wasn't in the room or the house. Concerned, I called her. After trying to call her a few times and getting nothing, I called my mother. She picked up, and I asked her if Sis told her where she was going. My mother, confused, asked me what I was talking about. She dropped Sis off at school before going to work. My sister had been at school this whole time. In shock, I hung up and kept this to myself, convinced I was losing my mind, that it was all in my head, but I remember that moment so vividly. What my sister was wearing, how she was sitting, how I felt a shift in the couch when she sat down. This wasn't a dream, this was real, it had to be. There was something in my house with me that morning, and it was not my sister. About a decade back, I used to work at a brewery. It was set in a pretty big and old building from the early 1900s. I worked there for a couple of years, and most of the time it was pretty chill, but backbreaking at times. On my time working there, I had two experiences I can only describe as supernatural. The first one was a particularly late night, and I was tasked with closing up the hangar. Closing it up was making sure there wasn't anything obstructing where the trucks would park, stacking up any loose crates, or turning the lights off and locking it all up. I was about done, so I turned off the lights, and as I was making my way to the door, a beer bottle comes rolling towards me from the dark between the tall stacks of crates. It wasn't forceful or anything. It looked like someone gently placed it on the floor and rolled it towards me. I didn't think too much of it, so I picked up the bottle and placed it inside a half-empty crate. I turned around, and as I started walking, another bottle comes rolling from the same place. Then another one. Tired and thinking it was a co-worker trying to mess with me, I shouted, "Hey!" "All right, you got me. Come on, I gotta close it up." I expected to hear laughter or something, but instead, it was dead silent. I waited for a couple of minutes, turned on my flashlight, and started looking around the stacks of crates for what I thought would be a giggling co-worker. After searching each corner and turn, I gave up. I was a little weirded out at this point, but I just picked up the 2 bottles from the ground and placed it in the same crate as the first one. I turned off my flashlight and shouted at the darkness, "All right, I'm locking up. See you tomorrow." Just as I finished saying that, a crate full of bottles fell from one of the stacks and landed 2 feet from me, glass shards and beer exploding everywhere. The next day I told my boss about it, and he said it was probably a rat. The thing is, those crates, when full, probably weigh 20 pounds. How could a rat push it? Talking to my co-workers, they told me that they've also experienced weird stuff during closing hours. My second experience happened again when I was closing the place. This time, I was closing the pub. When closing the pub, the last thing you usually do is restock the walk-in freezer. The freezer is probably just as old as the building itself, and it sits underground, right beneath the bar. I was down there filling that enormous thing with kegs and crates. Being a very old freezer from a time when safety wasn't a big concern, the thing didn't open from the inside. No handle, nothing. Just a flat, plain steel door. So I did what I always did when I went inside that thing. I put a keg securing the door open. I was halfway through the task when I heard the door slamming shut. I rushed towards the door, but it was locked shut. I started pounding on it, but the only other person there was my boss in the office, 2 floors above me, probably with his door closed. I tried my phone, but since I was locked underground inside a steel and lead box, I had no service. I was wearing only jeans and a t-shirt, so things were getting chilly pretty quickly. My face was going numb, and my hands were getting stiff. I made a blanket out of cardboard, but it was doing very little keeping the cold at bay. The only reason I didn't freeze to death was because I had a date with a regular, and she went there looking for me. She asked my boss where I was, and when he couldn't find me, he went to the basement and found me inside the freezer. I was there for about 45 minutes when he found me, and I was starting to consider writing a letter to my parents and drinking myself to sleep. My boss installed a chain to keep the door open after that, but I refused to ever walk into that death trap again. The weirdest part, the keg I had holding the door open was on the other side of the room when I got out. It was a full steel keg, not something that just slides away, let alone quietly. I stopped working there shortly after that.